just never know when we're actually going live. So,
good morning, everybody. And as Jason said, he never knows when we're actually going live. So, welcome to Site Reliability Chats on May 11th, 2022. I'm Julie Gunderson, Senior Reliability Advocate here at Gremlin, and I'm joined by Jason Yee.
I'm Jason Yee, Director of Advocacy here at Gremlin and person who just doesn't know when things are live.
So the thing is I'm the one that hits the go live button, and then you have to hit it twice, and then sometimes there's a delay. So we also start our podcast, Break Things on Purpose, actually with some cold open. So we just wanted to bring that feeling over here. We're going to go with that, Jason. Jason and I are actually really excited right now because we are both headed to KubeCon in Valencia. I leave on Friday. Jason, when do you leave?
I leave on Saturday, which was maybe a poor choice by me because it means that I missed some important things on Saturday, which I've told Julie about. And that is that the grand finals of Eurovision are happening this coming Saturday. So you should definitely make time to watch Eurovision.
And if you're over there, ping us. You can find us on Twitter. Let us know, and maybe we can all hang out at KubeCon. So we kind of had just a couple of things to talk about today, but I think they're pretty interesting. For folks that may be unaware, Xbox had a pretty big incident over the weekend, and I just loved this clickbait kind of title because Xbox breaks its silence on server outages. There really wasn't much of a silence. Actually, Xbox talked about it on their Twitter support page, so I guess that might be breaking silence. But what happened is actually Xbox had two incidents this weekend, one on Friday, and then one immediately following up after the Friday incident was resolved on Saturday. What this really meant for Xbox users is that they could not play purchased games or purchase new games during this multi-day outage. And folks were quite outraged that games that they had purchased, that unfortunately they were unable to play those. And they took to social media to definitely talk about how angry they are. And a lot of folks were talking about the fact that there's no way to play games that they own because Xbox requires these games to be played online, even if they're single player games. Or if you had a disc and a machine that still took one of those things, they're round, shiny, you'd put them in a slot and they'd spin around and you'd play games on them. That is a way to play a game offline. So when we talk about reliability and how frustrated folks were about not having a way to fail backwards or to gracefully degrade, I think this is an important conversation to have. Jason, I've been talking a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting issue, right? Of when you're playing a game, especially one of the interesting things that came up, right, was it's one thing if the game requires a network because it's a multiplayer game. But if you're playing a game like, Elden Rings or whatever, where it's largely single player and you're exploring a world, the question is, other than maybe saving your stats to the server so that it syncs up, which it could probably store those locally for some time, like, why do you even need network connectivity? Like, why do you need all of this stuff? Like, can't you just play your games? But yeah.
Well, and pretty far off topic, but kind of on another thing. When I was looking into this article, I was like, I have a couple of movies that I've purchased on Disney Plus. If I cancel my Disney Plus subscription because I have too many subscriptions and it costs a lot of money, do I get to keep those movies? And everything that I found said no. And so it kind of goes to, so you have your subscription, like you have your Xbox Live subscription, right? Then you purchase your game or your Disney Plus subscription and your movie, but there's no way to take those with you, at least that I can find. So if there's anybody out there that knows the way, please tell me, because I couldn't find the way, at least for Disney Plus, to take my couple of movies that I've purchased. But what I have done is I've actually, instead of buying on Disney Plus, I started buying movies on Amazon Prime because they sync to my Movies Anywhere. So I can literally get them anywhere.
And the nice thing about Amazon is, even if you aren't an Amazon Prime member to get videos, you probably will still retain your Amazon account, even if you're not buying things from Amazon or doing any of their subscriptions. Those movies should still be available. I personally like to buy movies when they're available through Vimeo. Vimeo actually makes the movies that you purchase available for download. So you can actually just download the MP4 files for those. So I bought a few movies from them, and that's the nice thing about that platform is they are truly just like you buy it, you pay for it once, you can download it and put it wherever you want. And there's definitely some trust there that you're not going to upload that or share that around to various other services.
Well, and that's good. And kind of going back to the Xbox, and again, them breaking their silence on server outages. One thing that I did kind of want to touch on there. So as I mentioned, there were two outages. So the first outage actually lasted 9 hours and started on Friday. And Xbox did actually tell folks that they were aware of an incident, an outage, that folks they actually didn't use the word outage, which was smart of them, that they were aware that some users were unable to purchase and launch games or start cloud gaming sessions. And that was at 1:59 p.m. on May 7th. 1:59 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. on May 7th, which was when we saw our next update saying that folks should be seeing everything working for them. That was the second of the two, actually. I'm sorry. The first one was on May 6th. So they have been experiencing multiple incidents, at least letting folks know on their Twitter support page. But when we talk again about what do users do, why is reliability so important? Where's that market advantage? It's because they take to social media. They share these things wide and far with the world. And these were just a couple of examples. If you look at this tweet here, there's 924 likes on just that one tweet. And 790, actually, I guess I must have cut off the up arrow, upvotes on this Reddit discussion, which actually went on for quite a while as to ways that Xbox could actually make this experience better for their users. But it sounds like users have been asking for these features for a very long time. So I'm kind of curious as to what we're going to see, because Xbox did say that they were going to be making some improvements so that this wouldn't happen to folks again. That was like the big announcements that they're going to be making some improvements. There's going to be a migration. They used the word migration to make sure this doesn't happen again. And that's it. That was the words they used: improvements and migration. Beyond that, there weren't really any details.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two interesting parts that we should probably dive into. One is the multiple outages, which I think is common. One of the interesting things, despite the title that Xbox breaks its silence, is that Xbox and the Xbox division and Microsoft is actually, they really haven't broken their silence, right? There's the Twitter support page, which will announce when there's issues, but generally the Xbox team does not publish post-incident reviews or RCA reports, which is, I think, a problem, right? Because there's some opacity there that means that we will never understand what's going on and have insight into that. That said, with multiple outages, usually that's caused because you think there's a problem with something and you go and fix it, and it turns out that either that wasn't the proper fix, or that fix, as with all complex systems, leads to the creation of its own problems, which then come out. Without that report, it's a little unclear to say which of those actually happened.
And I would like to point out that it's important to not have your users inferring what the issue may be, because we can make up all sorts of crazy stories. Now, as Jason and I were actually talking about a little bit before we went live today, this second incident happened 3 hours after the first incident. And Jason was like, well, obviously it's because of whatever the fix was for the first one. Which, we can make up whatever we want because we don't know. And that's very much in contrast with last week's stream, where we were able to go over in depth the entire stream about Atlassian's post-incident report from their incident. And so we've talked about how Slack does things and how they are really good about posting updates, about how you can request those RCAs. So we encourage other companies to do that. Xbox, let's get into the blameless. Microsoft, let's get into the blameless post-mortem process. Share that with us.
I think the big advantage is, I think the traditional method of thinking about a business and what you share with customers has been that you don't share this information because it, with the traditional blameful culture, it looks like you people don't know what you're doing, right? Xbox is full of idiots. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Clearly they're having incidents. It's all garbage over there. You should not use Xbox. That's the traditional view. And when you post incident reviews or root cause analysis reports, the thing that does actually is the exact opposite. It gives us insight, especially as engineers. We can see what's happened, and a lot of these issues aren't uncommon. They're not really fringe issues. All of our issues that we experience within technology generally have similarities. And so we can resonate with that. And we can say, yeah, looking at this incident report from last week with Atlassian, they made really good decisions. They had constraints that led to the issues, but they made really logical, straightforward decisions. And we can complain about other things of what might have been better, things like that. But largely, we can look at that and say, as an organization, as an engineering and a technical organization, they did the best that they could. They made wise decisions with the information that they had, and they're continuing to improve. And this builds our trust in the solutions that they're building and the platform that they're building.
Now, what I do have to say, though, on the Atlassian one, that was very much geared towards engineers. With this Xbox incident, I think there should be one that's very technical and in-depth for what they can share. One of the things that Mandy and I had talked about is the fact that a lot of organizations can't share things just because of being public and stock prices and shareholders and all of that. But that said, I do think that there should also be something that is there for the end user, for the people that are just, not in tech, so that they can just understand, like, okay, this is a thing. It happened. We acknowledged it. This is what we did. But in layman's terms, kind of like those error messages that you get that are user-friendly error messages versus engineering-friendly messages, because sometimes I think we forget that our customers aren't all engineers.
Yeah. So we've given a few examples of good write-ups. And I wanted to make a note of Xbox is actually part of Microsoft, and they've had outages before, not due to Xbox's problems, but due to running on Microsoft Azure. So for example, a year ago, Xbox had an issue, and it was largely because Azure had an incident with Active Directory. They were migrating, and one of the Active Directory entries had a tag to retain it and not delete it in this transition period. That was ignored, and it got deleted, which led to a massive outage. But I did want to bring up that Microsoft on the Azure side has a fantastic status page that dives into issues. So if you were to go there, and we'll paste the link into the chat, I can do that.
It's already there, Jason.
Julie's on it. She's super fast about all these things. But if you were to go to that page, you would see things like this. Their last outage from April 8th of this year. And it has a nice summary of the impact. The impact basically was that a bunch of services went down or were unavailable due to network connectivity issues. But more than that, they actually dive into the causes behind this in a technical way. In this case, it ended up being that one of their services had network issues that caused a retry storm. Basically, as one of their systems couldn't access the system that was having network issues, it queued up some retries to try again. That ended up meaning that the system that was designed to handle 25,000 calls every minute was suddenly facing 150,000 calls every minute. And so obviously there were issues. The other great thing about this particular incident is they've got a write-up on the mitigation, basically how they solved it in the immediate time to resolve the issue, but also what they're going to do in order to correct the issue going forward. And so highly recommend that you take a look at that, whether or not you're an Azure customer, because it's a fantastic example of how to do this, how to write reports in a public way to provide information.
Yeah, and it wasn't too long. I mean, this was on, we could have actually fit the entire thing on one image here. It just would have been a little bit too little for everybody to read. But it was kind of a definite in between from the very, very long one from Atlassian to a more succinct one. But again, user facing, really easy to read, didn't include architecture diagrams. So it's hitting both audiences, but with that, when we talk about outages and incidents, there was something interesting that actually came out of Penn State, which is the fact that folks are completely dependent on social media now. And so I thought this was a really interesting one to actually talk about, considering that I think in almost every one of our live streams, there's been something from Twitter or a social media site where folks are talking about what's going on or learning about what's going on. But this study was conducted after a 6-hour Facebook outage in the fall of 2021. And during that outage, I don't know if everybody remembers this. I do. Definitely folks were flooding on Twitter talking about Facebook being down. I think the report says that there were like 250,000 tweets about the outage. So Facebook down was the top trending topic, which is definitely not what you want for your organization. But it actually showed how dependent folks are on social media, that if one site goes down, they'll go to another one just because they need that now. But one of the interesting things about this study also talked about the fact that this isn't just folks, browsing through Facebook or browsing through Twitter, whatever that social media app may be. People use these now for their business. This is how they make money. This is how they advertise. I mean, look at live streamers who actually make money. Jason and I definitely don't, but folks who do, right? When there are impacts on those outages have very, very real impacts, very emotional impacts. So emotional, monetary, all of those things. And I think it's worth talking about the fact that there's more to just a competitive advantage to being reliable.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Side note, although we don't make money on this, if you are fabulously wealthy or work for a company that wants to sponsor this and wants to just throw money at us, neither Julie nor I will say no.
I mean, I'll agree with that, Jason. I posted the link, by the way, to the study there from Penn State. But Jason, you were saying before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? The study itself came to some conclusions because of that, right? Because people rely on social media as part of their business. There was a notion of, should social media and platforms like this be considered utilities? And there are laws, at least within the US, around utilities and the services that they provide. And so, thinking of things like when your electricity goes out, and if your electricity or your gas goes out in the middle of winter and you don't have heat, that's a huge issue. And so the question though starts to become, where do we draw this line, right? If I'm providing a platform, sure, people will inevitably use that for some sort of business purpose. But I think there's a larger question here of, what do we call a utility? When do we start passing laws around reliability? And obviously there are people looking at that because they think there's positives and they think that they can legislate reliability, but what are the negatives and how does that impact our industry?
So I was actually just trying to find a link to it, Jason, because one of the talks that I went to at LISA 2014 was by Ben Rockwood. And I'm going to try to find a link to that here in a minute to share with folks if I can. But Ben Rockwood, LISA 2014.
Also,
he talked about
Ben Rockwood.
Yeah,
Chef friends.
Absolutely. Hi, Ben, if you're out there. So with that, though, there was a cascading failure at Facebook that had happened actually before that. So when was that? I think that huge one was in 2013 or something. Ben actually talked in 2014 about how Congress was going to start regulating social media sites like a utility. And so that was, what, how many years ago was that? 6 years ago? 7, 8 years ago? I didn't sleep very much last night, folks. Math is very hard today, but it kind of goes back to that whole concept. So when something is super important, what does that mean? And when we look at tools like Facebook added in that mark yourself safe. So Facebook can now be used to ensure that during a crisis time, you can tell if people in your company, if your friends and family, or even in your country area are safe. So does that deserve to be regulated? What are the rules around reliability on something that now becomes a public safety tool?
Yeah.
I'm asking, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is one where I would love to hear people's thoughts. So if you've got thoughts on this, leave a comment or post in the stream chat on LinkedIn, YouTube, or wherever you're watching this, because I think this is interesting. Personally, I lean more towards the side of it's a corporation, it's a business. What they do is, to me, not critical. Like, I mean, sure, you can take any product and make it part of a critical part of your life, but ultimately I lean more towards the less regulation on these things. Also, that's partly just because as an engineer, I'm afraid of, like, I don't write the best code. I don't build the best infrastructure. There's probably issues, and I've experienced them in past jobs, especially around scaling. Things just happen that you aren't aware of or that you don't know because they're unknown unknowns. And so the idea of being held accountable by some legal provision for things that I may not know about is terrifying.
It really is. And I'm kind of with you on that too. I mean, if we want a public utility that can have these same features, and they should develop a public utility that has these same features. I was actually having some interesting conversations at DevOps Days Boise last week about the space race. So what's going on with space, and space is being kind of privatized right now. We're going to leave names out of it because we don't need to get into that whole kit and caboodle, but yeah, the conversation was centered around, can private companies do things better than public company or than the government, which in general they kind of tend to, but not always. And so instead of regulating private companies like Facebook, like Instagram, I'm purposefully not saying another one just because of all the controversy around that, but really, can the government build something better?
I mean, the question that underscores that, though, is, like, should they even be doing that, right?
Well, yeah, but then that goes back to, do they regulate the things that the private sector has made? Like, this is actually, I think, an entire bigger conversation around human nature in general. So maybe it's too big of a conversation for our live stream today on Wednesday. But yeah, tell us what you think.
It's a really deep conversation, which is why, again, I encourage you to leave a comment with your thoughts in the live stream chat or on the YouTube page for this video, because I am honestly really interested to hear what other people have to say. You know, aside from me being terrified of legal provisions around my shoddy engineering work, there's also the question of, within the industry, we understand reliability in a very different way than politicians do, right? And we've seen this time and again with politicians that try to legislate things within the technical realm. Thinking of it in the past, things like copyright issues, and we have the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, right? And like what that means around what's available. We have a lot of issues around encryption and what's kept private, and the government always wanting a backdoor into things and not understanding that a backdoor for one entity is a backdoor for everybody. So I think that the government, in order to have insight to this, partly like the laws are just, to me, going to be bad because they don't have enough technical knowledge. And unfortunately in the US, I feel like most of our politicians aren't intellectually curious enough to get that technical knowledge.
So I'm finding a link to this today is all about Julie finding links, but at Scale 14X, Cory Doctorow actually gave a keynote that touched on this a little bit. So I'm posting the link to the opensource.com article that was written about his keynote, where he talked about this. So again, we're kind of going back in time. So I think I've talked about Scale 14X was actually Scale 2015, because the way the numbers
number each of them, which now the numbers were always one off, but now, I think that's now changed because of the past couple of years.
Yeah, because I think I'm speaking at, I think it's 19X that is in July, which I did just get an invite to, so I can almost look that up right now. So it's 19 or 20, something like that. Either way, Scale's coming up. If anybody's going to be in the Los Angeles area in July, come check it out. But with that, lots of really good conversations, I think, just in general, and things that folks should be thinking about. As much as we want everything to be open and willy-nilly and all of that, there is regulation in some industries that happens. I mean, we have regulation with flight software. So where does it start? Where does it stop? Big conversation. But with that, like and subscribe. Tell us what you think. Jason and I are going to be, like, as we mentioned, next week in Spain. So make sure you hit that bell button so that you can catch our live stream, because it might be just a little bit earlier or later if it's after the after party, which that could get very entertaining.
Yeah, we honestly don't know when we're going to be doing the stream, but again, hit that bell icon to be notified when we go live. If you are in Spain at KubeCon, we would love to hang out though. So especially if you wanted to hang out and join us on the show and comment about outages, incidents, and reliability. So if that's you, if you're going to be at KubeCon, drop by the Gremlin booth, come say hi to us, and maybe join the stream.
I like that. Do join the stream. I think that sounds like fun, Jason. We've already had some special guests, so we love having folks on it. And with that, we'll wish you a very happy Wednesday, or whatever day of the week it is that you happen to be watching this. And thanks for joining us today.